I will. We'll go ahead and get started. We have a pretty big lesson today. We'll have to get through, and it's going to be the second part about the story of Joseph. I think most people are here. So overall, kind of the big picture statement that we have for the story of Joseph is that it's a story about how God is fulfilling his promises through a dysfunctional family. So God made. Remember, what was the first covenant God made with an individual? Covered it. You're at.
Was it Abraham?
Yep. Yeah, Abraham. So Abraham was the first one he made a promise to an individual for his blessing. There's also the promise to Noah, but that was kind of more for the whole world. But the promise of Abraham was in chapter 12, and that really is being fulfilled through Abraham's descendants. So his first descendant being Isaac, and then Isaac, Jacob. And through there you saw that with Jacob, there's Jacob and Esau, and the seed, the promise, came through the younger son. Who usually got the birthright? Who usually? The oldest son, yes. So that's very typical for that day and age. But what you see throughout the story is God's turning things on its head. And one of the ways he often does that is he takes the younger, the lesser, and makes them the greater. The first will be last, and the last will be first. And so what about Jacob? What is Jacob like so far that we've learned? Is he admirable? Some not so admirable stuff?
Very passive,
Yeah.
non-leader.
Right. So he's very passive. That's one of his besetting sins. You see throughout, like there's times where he still goes to God. He worships. He trusts in the promise. But for the most part, he's pretty passive. He has some failings. But God is still going to work his promises through this person. And then what about Jacob's sons, especially before Joseph and Benjamin? What were Jacob's sons like? Yeah, so they kind of went to the other extreme, right? They were violent, wicked, greedy. There's a story with Shechem where Simon and Levi went and killed all the males of a city. They were murderers. And then, of course, with the story of Joseph, you see that with all of them, and Judah even leading the way to sell their brother into slavery. Joseph's betrayed. Joseph seems to be an outlier. He's different from the others. He's not wicked like his brothers. And his faithfulness keeps repaying itself with more trouble, more harm. You do see a story, this little interlude, talking about Judah. You see where he starts to actually recognize his sinfulness, his self-righteousness. He thinks he's good, but he realizes he's actually wicked. And you get this little bit of hope that maybe the brothers have changed. Maybe Judah can be a better leader for the family. And there starts to, we'll cover today, some of the trials and testing of Joseph's brothers to see if they've changed and to affect change. And then we've been seeing the story of Joseph and his faithfulness wherever he's at. Through all the trials, all the hardships, he remains faithful. He remains trusting in God. He has a bigger picture of what God's doing through this. So these trials are really affecting and growing Joseph to trust in God and trust his work even through hardship. And we'll pick up where we left off, which was after Joseph was at Potiphar's wife. He was faithful. He didn't fall into sin. He rejected Potiphar's wife. He fled instead. And he was punished for his righteousness. He was punished for doing what was right and thrown into prison. So it just keeps getting worse and worse for Joseph. So we'll read that. So Joseph's master took him and put him into jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in jail. But Yahweh was with Joseph and extended loving kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. So it reminds you of what happened when he went into Potiphar's house as a slave. Even though he was a slave, even though he's a prisoner here, it's saying that God was still being kind to Joseph. He was still extending his loving kindness, even in the middle of being in prison, in the pit, 22. So the chief jailer gave into the hand of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. So he was very trustworthy because he was a faithful man, and he was given more responsibility because he was trustworthy, which is the exact same thing that happened with Potiphar. 23, the chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's hand because Yahweh was with him, and whatever he did, Yahweh made to succeed. So it's giving credit to Yahweh. God is the one in control. God is the one that is helping Joseph in his faithfulness. And Joseph's life, it's a very major roller coaster. And probably as you get older, you'll feel life becoming more and more like this. There's lots of ups and downs. One day things could be going great. The next day you get some bad news and it seems like it's in the pits again. Joseph's life was this way. He was sold into slavery, but God used him, made him succeed, lifted him up, and then his faithfulness causes him to be thrown into prison. He goes down again, but you see him starting to raise up even in the midst of where he was. His life was a roller coaster. And throughout this, Joseph doesn't give up. He doesn't give into pity. He doesn't give into despair. You'll see some of his other family members give into self-pity. Joseph doesn't give into victimhood, like, oh, everything's against me. All this stuff is bad is happening to me. He doesn't give up. He remains faithful. And the reason for that is because he knows and believes God and trusts in God. The only way you can live a life that's steady without all these ups and downs, because circumstances are going to go up and down, is if you have a rock-solid trust in the sovereignty of God through all of life's challenges. Another thing is you can't measure God's loving kindness in your life by how easy it is. Do you remember last week we looked at the prosperity gospel? Can somebody tell me real quick what the prosperity gospel is?
It's kind of like telling you if you do good works and stuff and give me your money, you'll end up rich like me and happy and stuff.
Yeah, that's basically it. So, and it's a very, very popular thing here, whereas God's Santa Claus, and his goal is to make your life happy, and you just have to have enough faith. And God loves you, so because he loves you, he's going to make your life easier and better, and you'll be healthier and wealthier. But that's not how you can measure God's loving kindness in your life. You can measure it based on his faithfulness to you, no matter how difficult the circumstances. And it's an encouraging reminder that you can be faithful no matter where you are. Even though, like, you guys you're young, you can be faithful where you're at, where God has placed you. And faithfulness where you're at in little things is what actually allows you to take on more responsibility. And we'll see this with Joseph. So Joseph, the interpreter. The chief cupbearer, the chief baker are thrown into prison with Joseph. And they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Recount it to me, please." So Joseph, his faith hasn't faltered. He still knows and trusts in God, and he knows that God is where wisdom comes from. So he interprets the dream, and if you recall, what happened to the cupbearer and the baker? How did it go for them?
The baker was going to be hanged,
Yep.
killed, and the cupbearer was going to be saved.
Right. So that's what he, and I guess I put up the answer there for you early. But yeah, I know you got it right. You got it right. And it happened exactly as it did. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. And if you're Joseph, and as you're reading the story, you have to kind of recall a prior dream. What were the last dreams that we learned in this story? Do you remember? Caleb?
With like the bundles of corn and stuff, and they're like bowing down to him.
Yeah, right. So it brings to pass the dreams that Joseph had about himself. And when is this going to happen, right? When are those dreams going to be fulfilled? In Joseph, he asked the cupbearer to remember him. "Only remember me when it goes well with you, and please show me loving kindness by remembering me to Pharaoh and getting me out of this house." So Joseph takes initiative. He's not a fatalist. He doesn't just give in to his fate and say it is what it is. He actually takes some action, not in a complaining, whining way, but he asks the cupbearer to remember him, to get him out of prison. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph interpreted him. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So the cupbearer was not faithful like Joseph. He instead forgot him. What would have happened if he didn't forget him? Let's say he actually remembered, he told Pharaoh, Pharaoh got him out. What would have happened? What was that? Yeah, it'd be the end. It'd be, okay, he's free, finally. As you're reading this story, if you're reading it for the first time, you might be like, great, hopefully he gets out, right? And then, and Joseph, he obviously was hoping that he remembered and he got him out, but he forgot. There's no apparent justice. There's no fairness in life, in Joseph's life. God's goal isn't to make your life as fair as possible. If he did, you would go straight to hell, because that's what we all deserve. But he instead is using people and using the apparent unfairness in life for his purposes. So there's no outcry for the innocent, and he's forgotten. But of course, throughout this story, we see that just because he's forgotten, just because he's mistreated by men, doesn't mean that God has forgotten him. He's not forgotten by Yahweh. And what we see is the fact that he was forgotten means that he will get remembered at the right time. So Genesis 41, 8. Now it happened that in the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men, and Pharaoh recounted to them his dream. But there's no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. So there's all these magicians. Kind of reminds you a little bit of the story of Exodus, all the magicians there, and they failed. Worldly wisdom didn't give the right answer to Pharaoh. They didn't have any true power or insight. Genesis 41:12. Now there's with us a Hebrew youth, a slave of the... So this is the cupbearer now. He actually remembers, oh, I know somebody who actually does know how to interpret dreams well. And so he brings to memory Joseph at this critical time and talks to Pharaoh and tells him about Joseph. Now there's with us a Hebrew youth, a slave of the captain of the bodyguard. And we recounted them to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me in my office, but he hanged him. So one thing just to call out is, even though Joseph, he wasn't a magician, he didn't have this high status like the other magicians that failed. He had a very low status as a slave. He was young, he wasn't an elderly man, and yet he was wise. And that's something that you can remember as well. Sometimes people maybe underestimate the fact that youth can be wise, they can follow God, they can follow his ways. They don't have to follow the ways of the world, the ways of their friends. You can be different, you can be an outlier like Joseph. So Pharaoh, he sent and called for Joseph, and they rushed him out of the pit, and he shaved himself and changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. So this is 13 years since Joseph was sold into slavery. 13 years later, that's a long time. Who here is 13 years old? Few of you, yeah. So imagine your whole life you were in, or that entire time period you were in slavery and in the pit. 13 years. But he's been faithful. It hasn't paid off yet, but he's been faithful nonetheless. And then in an instant, he's rushed out of the pit. So remember, the pit is where he was initially thrown. That's where it was started, the pit with his brothers. And the prison is also called a pit. And this just symbolically shows how in an instant he's brought out of all of that hardship and trial. And he appears before Pharaoh, probably the most powerful man in the world at the time. So Pharaoh said to him, I've had a dream, but no one can interpret it. Yet I have heard it said about you that you hear a dream and that you can interpret it. Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me God will answer concerning the welfare of Pharaoh. So even before him, even as Pharaoh says something positive about him, he doesn't take credit for himself. He immediately gives credit back to God. God's the one that interprets. I'm not wise in myself. People who think they're wise in and of themselves tend to not be. At least they're not wise in God's eyes. People that are wise in God's eyes, you have to actually realize that wisdom is from God, that it starts with a right view of God as well. So Joseph, he doesn't take credit. Instead, he is humble towards Pharaoh. And that humility, it comes from a right view of God and a right view of wisdom. For Yahweh gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and discernment. And some of you are memorizing James. What's a passage in James? It says, if you lack wisdom, what do? Remember, Luke? Oh, yes.
You need to, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach.
Right, yeah, go to God, right? God can give you wisdom, even while you're young. And of course, it primarily comes from understanding the Bible. The more you understand God rightly, the more you understand people rightly, understand God's principles, the more you'll have a right view of reality. And in many ways, wisdom is seeing reality, understanding it, understanding how to live skillfully within the way the world is. And the Bible's the big picture worldview. It gives you to be able to understand correctly how to live. So Joseph is the recipient of wisdom. Verse 25. So now Joseph is going to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has declared to Pharaoh what he is about to do. So this isn't something that is a surprise or unplanned. This is something that God is about to do. God is about to bring the abundance, and he is going to bring the famine. And Joseph is saying that God has declared to Pharaoh, he's telling Pharaoh what he's about to do as a leader of this land. Verse 28. It is as I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them, 7 years of famine will arise, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land, so that the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine. So the abundance is going to be pretty great, but once a famine comes around, they're going to forget about it. It's going to seem so bad, for it'll be very heavy. Verse 32. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is confirmed by God, and God will quickly bring it about. And after interpreting the dream, Joseph then goes on to give Pharaoh advice, which is pretty bold for a prisoner, but he gives advice to Pharaoh. Verse 33, so now let Pharaoh look for a man of understanding and wisdom. So he's saying you need to find somebody wise to be able to manage this situation accurately. There's some evidence that Pharaoh at this point could have been pretty young. Later on, it talks about Joseph being described as a fatherly figure to Pharaoh. So the Pharaoh at this point may have been fairly young. And Joseph is giving him advice. Look for a man of understanding and wisdom and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action and appoint overseers over the land. Let him exact a fifth of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. So up to this point, we've seen Joseph succeed. We've seen him be faithful. Success is always attributed to God. Yet, once we come to this point in the story and throughout the time of the famine, it's the author starts putting on display all of Joseph's wisdom. So God is making him succeed, but it's not apart from Joseph. It's not apart from Joseph's actions and what he does as well. God is using that instead. So we're just going to quickly go through some of the things that we see makes Joseph a wise leader, very fit to execute on the need of the time with the coming abundance and famine. So what do you think? What makes someone a wise leader? What attributes would you give them? What are some practical things, Luke?
Well, they would be the ones to take action.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Take initiative. Jonathan?
Good leadership.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Not guide someone in the wrong way.
Okay. You had something else?
To protect.
Yeah, yep. What about over here? What do you think? You have thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, just not even just like taking initiative, but having the right motive in your
Okay.
initiative and knowing what you should do.
Right. The right motive. So that's a good point. It really contrasts with Joseph's brothers, right? They took initiative in some cases, but it was with wrong motives. So we'll just quickly go through and look at some of the things we learned from this passage. It's not exhaustive on the topic, but things that are immediately on the surface of the text. So first of all, he establishes a vision and a big picture strategy. So he goes to the Pharaoh and says, look, here's what's about to happen. Here's what you need to do to plan for the next 14 years. So he's casting a vision of here's what's going to happen. Here's what we should do. Here's how it could actually work out well for us. And he's taking proactive steps with the future in mind. So imagine if they waited for the time of famine. Okay, a year in, and they're like, man, this famine's pretty bad. We better do something about it. People are complaining. How would that go? They waited for the famine. Let's wait to make sure there's a problem here. What do you think, Jonathan?
Most likely people would try to overthrow.
Yeah, that happens often. Did you raise your hand? Oh, yeah. So it would have been too late, right? It would have been too late by that point. You have to actually, it's in the times of abundance that you have to plan for bad times, and Joseph understands that. So it's in the moment when nobody thinks this is like, what's the big deal? We have all this food. Why do we have to store it? Why do we have to save it? Every year comes more and more abundance. But a wise leader in Joseph, he knows that they need to take steps now to plan for the future and do things with the future in mind. And so he says with this wise leader, you should set him over the land. So he should have authority. He should be able to have clear ownership to make sure that they gather the food right and they execute on things well. So there's clear oversight. There's clear ownership of what needs to be done. There's an individual responsible for it. And you need that to be able to take action. And there's this call to action, take action. So a wise leader, they have a bias to get things done. They have a bias to take initiative, to take action, to not sit back, right? We see with Jacob, he had a passivity about him. Even later with Jacob and his sons, as they're starving, he goes to his sons and says, what are you all doing looking at yourself? Like, go. We need to go get food from Egypt. So a wise leader, they take action. They have a bias for it. And they appoint overseers. So here, what's an overseer? Mm-hmm.
Kind of like someone who takes care of the land almost.
Yeah. So how good do you think? So Egypt is a fairly big place. There's multiple cities, multiple lands. How well could Joseph or anybody have done overseeing it all? Could they have done it all by themselves? So what do you have to do then, if you can't do it all by yourself?
You have to have many people, probably.
Have what?
You probably need many people to look over different areas.
Yep. So and that's what Joseph is recommending is appoint overseers, appoint sub-leaders. This is called delegation, where it's like, okay, this person's responsible, but you give some ownership, you give responsibility to a group of other people so that they can oversee their smaller area. That's called delegation. That's what Joseph is recommending. You see this also in the story of Moses. When everybody was coming to Moses to judge. Moses was making every decision. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, was like, you can't be doing this. You can't be doing everything on your own. You need to appoint wise leaders underneath you to oversee the small matters. And then if something's really important, it'll come all the way up to you. So that's what wise leaders do. They delegate. Some other things, they manage resources well. In this case, the major resource that Joseph in Egypt needed to manage was food, but everybody has different resources that you have to do a good job overseeing. The biggest one, especially for you guys right now, is time. And you have more time than you realize. Once you grow up, you get a job, you'll realize how much time you had. And then you'll get married and you'll realize how much time you really had. And then you'll have kids and you realize how much time you really had. So everybody has time and you have to be able to manage that well. You probably don't have much of this, but once you get older, hopefully you'll be getting a job and you'll have to manage your money well and any sort of goods or things that you have. So with Joseph, he's gathering these resources, he's protecting it, keeping watch over it. Of course, during the famine time, people are going to want to come in and steal, right? So he's protecting those resources and he's allocating it. He's choosing, how are we going to best use this? Where's the best use of this? So even for you, you could think about your time, like what's the best use of my time? What's the best use of my talents and everything that God's given me? How do I best use this for good? And after Joseph gives his vision, his presentation for how to handle this up-and-coming trial, Pharaoh recognizes it and sees the wisdom in it. Verse 37, and the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit? So even Pharaoh recognized that this was from God. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made you know all of this, there's no one so understanding and wise as you are. So he was recognized for his wise leadership, which of course was true. And you saw that in prison, you saw that as a slave. Verse 40, you shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. So Pharaoh appoints Joseph as second in command. So we don't really have this, like who's sort of the main leader of the U.S.? President, right? It's a president. In other systems, like Britain, is the king the main leader? Do they have a king? They have a king, but they also have a prime minister. So that's a fairly common structure throughout history, and this was essentially what was being set up with Pharaoh and Joseph. So Pharaoh was the main king. He was the main guy. They treated him like a god. But then he set up somebody that was second in command that actually ran things. It actually kept the state going. And Joseph becomes that second in command with a primary goal of preparing for the future with the famine. So Joseph's faithfulness, in a little, it paid off. It paid off where he's put in charge of probably the greatest kingdom in the world at the time. It's a crazy reversal, right? From slave to ruler. So a couple other things you can see with a wise leader. The proposal seemed good. He was persuasive. He was winsome. And they take on increasing responsibility. They don't just be like, well, here's my little thing. I'm just going to do this one thing well. They actually are willing to take on increasing responsibility, delegate as needed. So that's what Joseph does. And then you see there's hardly a respite. Joseph gets right to work. He doesn't just talk about it. He can't just tell a good idea. He actually can execute it. He can get it done. So he gathered. And the way he did it was he had these overseers and he had storage units in each of the cities, in each of the places where there was fields. So you can imagine, again, Egypt is a big place. He didn't have one big storage facility in the center. He instead spread them out. Because what would be hard about having a storage? Imagine if this was like a big map. Here's the capital, all the different fields, and all these little storage facilities. Why does that work better than having one big storage facility in the middle?
Well, because if there's one big one in the middle, then it's a really long time to like bring the food out to those different places.
Right, yeah. So it's just more efficient. So a wise leader, they think they're thoughtful. They think through ways to be efficient and productive. And he stored up grain in great abundance, so he's effective. He actually got results. And he even measures it. So at some point it got so great that they couldn't keep measuring, but he was measuring and tracking results. And you see this throughout Scripture where wise leaders, they bring in some organization, they track, they have lists. That's partly why we do church membership. is because in the Bible, in the New Testament, you see that they know their people, they track it. And that's what wise leaders do. And then the famine comes, and people are famished. They're crying out for food to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, it's not my problem, go to Joseph. So Joseph is trusted, and he's delegated to by other leaders. And being a wise leader means you have to make difficult decisions, and you have to make decisions for what's best in the long term that not everybody's going to be happy with. And you see throughout here, Joseph, he cares most about God and doing the right thing instead of maintaining his good reputation. So it doesn't say, I don't know how people eventually are very thankful for Joseph and what he does, but in the middle of it, they're crying out for food. They're like, why are you letting us starve here? So he makes difficult decisions and takes on that responsibility. And he does it not for himself. He's not doing, like you said, for greed. He does it, in this case, and throughout much of the text, he's still serving his master faithfully, Pharaoh. So he throughout this whole process, Pharaoh becomes incredibly wealthy because of Joseph's faithfulness to serve him well. But not only does he become wealthy, he ultimately serves a greater good. Because if people were coming to him, he's like, yeah, take all the food you want, take it all, just providing and making them happy, they would have ate it too fast, right? So later in other parts, it talks about how they rationed the food. They had to be very careful with how much they gave out. So Joseph was a wise leader. He was the man for the time, the man of action to preserve the people. And want to quickly deal with a philosophy that is somewhat popular, and its popularity has gone up and down, but it's this idea of let go and let God. So some people might see Joseph and be like, oh, he made him successful. So if you want to be successful, just sit back and God will make you successful, right? Have you guys heard this phrase before, let go and let God? What do you think about it?
I mean, it's basically saying don't take action. Instead, let God do it.
Basically, yeah.
There's some truth in that. You should let God take control of your life, but you can't just sit back.
Right, exactly. So this philosophy, it's gone by different names. Keswick was a common name. Even in philosophy and outside of the Bible, it's a form of fatalism. It's like the fate is the fate. Just let it happen. Nothing I can do about it. Throughout church history, there's a quietism movement where they thought we're just going to try to be at peace, not do anything, not be active, and that's what's holy. I mean, you think about monks, right? Are part of this. There's also, you could call it hyper-Calvinism. So Calvinism is the idea that God is sovereign over everything. And some people take that to mean, well, if he's sovereign over everything, then I don't need to do anything. If God wants something, he'll have it done. So that's why it's called hyper-Calvinism. They're going beyond the point of what we mean when God's sovereign. So here's an example of that, though. If God wants to save someone, he will. He doesn't need me. So is that true? So who thinks that is not true? Raise your hand. Okay. Who thinks that is true? Okay. I think that's good. There's sort of like kind of, right? There's something missing. So what's missing? So what's well, let's start there. What's right about that? What's sort of maybe the kernel of truth that's correct?
Well, that he can save someone if he wanted to without your help, but he chooses to use you.
Yeah, you got straight to the conclusion. Good job. So God, it's right. He doesn't need us, right? God, he chooses, he elects. You saw that with Jacob, right? God chose that the younger would receive the birthright in Jacob's case, and God could accomplish that. Jacob and his mother took matters into their own hands and tried to do it in a deceitful way, which wasn't right. So in one sense, it's true. God doesn't need us. God will accomplish his purposes with or without us. Yet, and this is what's missing from this mindset, yet God chooses to use people, chooses to use ordinary means. And so people that are people will still be held responsible for their inaction. So if there's somebody that needs to hear the gospel, who should go out and share it with them? It's you, right? It's your job. You can never ever use God's sovereignty as an excuse to give up or not try something or not do something. So here's a few verses on this. 1 Corinthians 15. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. So just like Joseph, how is Paul who he is? How is he saved? How did he become the man that he was? It's only by the grace of God. You always attribute it to God's grace because you don't deserve it. You couldn't do it on your own. And his grace towards me did not prove vain. So he's saying God showed me grace, but that grace wasn't vain or pointless. It actually caused something in Paul. It actually did something in Paul but I labored even more than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God within me. So Paul, like Joseph, worked hard. He took action. He did things. Not because of his strength and he was trusting in himself, but because of God's grace. So you can see that in your life. God is giving you so many mercies and grace. Even the fact that you're born in a Christian family, even the fact that you hear truth, God has given you so many undeserved mercies. And what are you going to do with that? Are you going to reject it, or are you going to see it as a grace and actually act on it and do something about the mercies that God has shown you? Be grateful for where you are. Act on it. 2 Timothy 2:10. For this reason, I endure all things for the sake of the elect. So he recognized that there are elect, there are people that God have chosen, and that doesn't make him say, well, I guess I could just sit back. But he says instead, because God has chosen, and there's other passages in the Bible like this, because God has chosen people, because he has elected people, that actually motivates you to take action. Like, I know God has people in the world. Because of that, I know I can go and share the gospel, and that God will use that. God will use his word to save people. I don't know in every instance, I don't know the specific people, but I know God uses people like me, weak, ordinary people, to accomplish his purposes. So his election is actually a motive to go out and do things. So trusting God, it never means that you just sit back passively. It never means you just wait. It means that you trust God while you work hard to fulfill his purposes. And always remembering that it's not on you. If there's success, it's not because of your talents. It's because of God working. But you can also be very grateful and thankful that God does choose ordinary means. He does allow people like us to be part of his story. So don't ever say let go and let God. So many like short little phrases like that. They sound good at the beginning, but you really got to dig into them and see if it makes sense. So Joseph, he certainly did not have that mindset, and he now is the exalted king figure. So we saw from the very beginning with the dreams, this sense that he might be the ruler. And throughout this story, you have this question. There's this failure, this lack of leadership in Jacob's family. Who's going to be the leader? The first three oldest sons disqualified themselves. You see Judah, he was repentant. There's some hope for him maybe. But you really see Joseph taking on that role as a ruler in Jacob's family. He is exalted to be the ruler in Egypt, at least. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen. Last time he was clothed in garments, it didn't work out so well for him. This time it actually does. And put the gold necklace around his neck, and he had him ride in his second chariot, basically the chariot for the second in command. And they called out before him, "Bow the knee," and he set him over all the land of Egypt. It's a complete reversal. And we see God fulfilling his promises through this story, through Joseph. Because from the very beginning with Abraham, God promised, "In you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Now Egypt and all the families of the earth will be blessed because of Joseph being a wise leader and providing the means for people to be saved in the famine. And it also reminds you of the dominion mandate, that men will have dominion. They'll be God's representatives over all of earth. Joseph is a true man that is representing God well, having dominion over the earth. And Pharaoh, he's given an Egyptian name, an Egyptian wife, and 2 sons are born to him. So you might be a little worried as you're reading this, like, is he going to become like an Egyptian? But you see signs that he doesn't forget his roots, because when he has 2 sons, he gives them Hebrew names. He doesn't give them Egyptian names. Firstborn, Manasseh, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my household. And he named the second Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So he recognizes what God has done in his life. He's given him relief. He's made him fruitful and successful in this foreign land where he was originally afflicted. And Joseph lived happily ever after. The end. Why is that not the end? What hasn't been resolved or fixed yet? Yeah, what about his brothers, right? They haven't been reconciled yet. There's still that broken relationship. And also, like, what about God's promises about making a great nation? If Joseph's going to be the king figure, if he's going to be the leader of the family, how's that going to happen when he's in Egypt off on his own? And who is Jacob, right? Because Abraham, he gave his blessing to Isaac. Isaac gave his blessing to Jacob. Who is Jacob going to give his blessing to continue the promises of God? And so we'll look now at Joseph the tester, and really the very dramatic part of the story as the brothers go down to Egypt. So if you have your Bibles, we're just gonna walk through the passages here. So open them up to Genesis 42. Genesis 42, verse 6. Genesis 42, verse 6. Now Joseph was the one in power over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. So not just the Egyptians, all the people, all the nations, they were coming to Joseph because Egypt was the only one with a wise leader that saved up. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. What does that immediately remind you of? They came and bowed down to him. His dreams, right? Like, you start seeing them fulfilled. And Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. And he said to them, "Where have you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." But Joseph recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. So he looked like an Egyptian at this point. It also continues the theme of his brothers being a little obtuse, not seeing things, but Joseph being a man of insight. Verse 9, and Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them. So he's remembering the dreams. He sees it. He knows, he has a sense of what God's doing. Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to look at the nakedness of the land." So he remembers the dreams and he says, "You're spies." Why? What is Joseph doing here? Why doesn't he say, like, "Aha, I'm Joseph, prepare to die"? What do you think what is he trying to do here? Titus?
He's trying to discern whether they have changed or not.
Yeah, he's testing them. He's testing them, and it's interesting, in the New Testament, the word for trial is also the word for testing. So he's testing them, but he's also putting them through a trial to show them their guilt and bring to mind. Because remember, who else has received a false accusation in the story of Joseph? Joseph, right? He was falsely accused. Now he's making his brothers go through the exact same thing he went through. Then they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men." What do you think Joseph did when they said that? Maybe rolled his eyes a little. "Your servants are not spies." And he said to them, "No, but you have come to look at the nakedness of our land." So he keeps accusing them And his brothers try to explain themselves. And then go down to verse 19. So Joseph is going to give them a test. He's going to give them a trial. Okay, if you want to prove yourself to be honest men, verse 19. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go, bring grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words may be proven true, and you will not die. And they did so. So first he puts his brothers in prison. Again, he was in prison. He puts his brothers in prison. And he's telling them, like, well, if you want to prove yourself, then you need to bring your brother back. Prove you're not lying to me about that. That's not really the best test. How does that prove it? Like, can't they just grab any kid? But Joseph will actually know. And and he wants to see his brother as well. So verse 21, then they said to one another, surely we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, yet we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us. So you start seeing a little bit of insight into his brothers. They actually start bringing God into it. They have a little bit of a bigger view than you saw before. And they start seeing their own guilt. Like, this is happening to us because we deserve it. Because we in their mind killed Joseph, God is going to bring on us what happened. And some of it's true. They're in prison. Verse 22, and Reuben answered them, saying, did I not tell you, saying, do not sin against the boy? Yet you would not listen. He's saying a little bit of an I told you so. So also his blood, behold, it is required of us. Now they did not know that Joseph was listening, for there was an interpreter between them. And he turned away from them and wept. Why did Joseph weep? What caused him to weep? Yes? Yeah, he still loves them. And also, he hears them actually starting to recognize their guilt. So he loves them, and he's seeing some signs in them, perhaps. But of course, he's going to keep testing them. Then he returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their bags with grain and to restore every man's money in his sack and give them provisions for their journey. And thus it was done for them. So he sends them back and he gives them, the brothers don't know this, but he puts their money back in their sack. And the brothers go back. On the way, one of the brothers realizes the money's in the sack, and they're like, oh no, like, we're going to be in trouble. They're going to think we stole this. So they're all worried. They go back to Jacob, and they know that they got to bring Benjamin back. So they tell Jacob about what happened. They leave out a lot of the difficult parts. They don't mention being in prison. They don't mention finding the sack. They're trying to persuade Jacob, like, send us Benjamin. They leave out a lot of the scary parts of the story because they know their father will be less likely to let Benjamin go. But then, with Jacob there, they find the other parts of the sack. And now Jacob realizes the true danger. So verse 35. Now it happened that they were emptying their sacks, and behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And they and their father saw their bundles of money, and they feared. And their father Jacob said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simon is no more, and you would take Benjamin? All these things are against me. So it's interesting. This is the second time his brothers, or Jacob's sons, have come back without a brother. And both times they have a little bit more money with them. So maybe Jacob, in the back of his mind, he's putting two and two together. So but he has a little bit of a pity party, saying everybody is against me. All these bad things. He just is pitying himself. So then Reuben, who he tries to be the leader here, then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, you may put my two sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Imagine if you're one of Reuben's sons and you hear him say this. It's like, wait, what, Dad? What was that? Then you will bring my where are we? You may put my two sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hand, and I will return him to you. So it's kind of a little bit of a foolish offer, pretty brash. It's also offering to sacrifice someone else, his own sons. So it's not taken seriously by Jacob. Verse 38, but Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone remains. If harm should befall on him on the journey on which you are going, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. He doesn't want to give up Benjamin. He doesn't want to lose Benjamin too. So you see this strife, right? They still are a very dysfunctional family, and Jacob won't let Benjamin go because he doesn't want to risk his life. But of course, the famine keeps happening. They run out of food. Jacob comes to the brothers one day and says, "Hey guys, I think we got to go back to Egypt. How about you just go and go back and get some more food?" And his brothers are like, "Dad, you remember what he's told us, that we got to bring Benjamin back." Like Jacob almost forgets that point, and so his brothers are reminding him, like, "No, like we have to take Benjamin back." And this time, instead of Reuben, it's Judah that takes a lead and is a spokesperson for his brothers. And so look at verse 8 of chapter 43. Verse 8 of chapter 43. Then Judah said to his father, "Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, we, as well as you and our little ones. I myself will be the guarantee for him. From my hand you may require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then I shall bear the sin before you all my days." So Judah, he makes a commitment, but what is he guaranteeing? Who does he put on the chopping block? Himself. Not his son, himself. He says, "I will take responsibility." He makes an oath. He makes a promise. Remember before, they're not honest men. So now the question is Judah, is he going to fulfill this oath? Look at verse 14. So Jacob lets him go, verse 14, and he prays to God. He asks God for help. "And may God Almighty grant you compassion before the man, so that he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved." So he's a bit of a fatalist, but he asks God for help. And he actually takes on the role of a wise leader. He gives advice. He tells them to take honey and all these valuable goods to give as a gift to them. And so they go down with Benjamin. And they come in to they get invited into Joseph's house for a meal. And they're like, "What's going to happen? Is he going to kill us now because of this?" So he goes to the steward and tells them, like, "Guys, look, the money was put in our sack. We don't know what happened." The official says, "I'm like, don't worry, God put it back in your sacks. You're fine." So they receive grace. They receive grace, undeserved favor, and they're given a meal before Joseph. So verse 23, this is when the official tells them about the money being put back in their sack. And he said, "Be well, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. Your money has come to me." Then he brought Simon out to them. So they're restored. All the brothers are together again. Verse 24. Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet. And he gave their donkeys fodder. So they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. They must be wondering what's going on, like all this graciousness from their host. Verse 26, then Joseph came home, and they brought into the house to him the present which was in their hand, and bowed to the ground before him. Again, the dream, they bow. 27, and he asked them about their well-being and said, "Is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" Joseph loves his father. He wants to know his well-being. 28, and they said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." They bowed down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. Benjamin was alive when Joseph was sold into slavery, so he knew him. He must have cared for him still. And he said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "May God be gracious to you, my son." And Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred with compassion over his brother. And he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. So he was overcome with emotion, seeing his brother, his brother, the one that didn't sell him into slavery for the first time. Look down at verse 34. So he wants to test them, though, right? Because Benjamin was the daughter of Rachel, just like Joseph was. He was clearly favored by his father. He didn't come the first time. So he wants to see, like, are they jealous of Benjamin like they were jealous of me? Verse 34. And Joseph took portions to them from his own table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times greater than any of theirs. So how are Joseph's brothers going to react? Are they going to be jealous of Benjamin receiving this? You see the end of the verse. So they feasted and drank freely with him. They didn't. They were joyful. They weren't jealous of Benjamin. So the brothers are starting to pass the first test. They see that they don't have that bitterness towards Benjamin that they had towards Joseph. So Joseph's going to up the ante. He's going to increase the pressure of the test. So turn to chapter 44. Look at verse 9. With whomever of your servants it is found. So he doesn't put the money back in their sacks, but the official puts Joseph's drink, his own special cup, into the sack of Benjamin. And then the brothers are going off. They think everything's fine. And the official comes down and says, somebody stole the Joseph's cup. Who stole it? The brothers are like, not us. They're honest men in their mind. Not us. We wouldn't do that. Kill whoever actually took the cup and throw us all in prison. And the official was like, no, we won't do that. I'm just going to put in prison whoever stole the cup. So they're like, yeah, look away. They were sure that none of them would have done this. So look at verse 11. Then he hurried. Each man brought his sack down to the ground, and each man opened his sack. So he searched, beginning with the oldest, ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Just imagine his brothers, like their just heart absolutely sinking as soon as this is brought out. Verse 13. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. So Joseph's brothers, they had a choice. Could they have gone free? They could have gone free without Benjamin, just like they did with Joseph, right? They could have preserved their own life, but instead they were sorrowful, they were mournful, and they returned to the city together. All of them went back together for their brother. They didn't just walk away and preserve their safety. Verse 14. Then Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, so they fell to the ground before him. So now imagine this. Let's say you're Judah. Benjamin's taken away to Pharaoh. You're coming back to the city with your brothers. What are you going to tell Pharaoh? What do you think, David? What are you going to tell Pharaoh?
Pharaoh or
I'm sorry, not Pharaoh. Yeah, Joseph.
I don't know, probably pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. Do you think you'd try to maybe try to convince him, say they're honest men? Like, it's interesting. We'll see how Judah responds, how he talks to him. In verse 15, Joseph says the first word. And Joseph said to them, "What is this deed that you have done? Do you not know that such a man as I can indeed interpret omens?" So that phrase there, "What is this deed you have indeed done?" That's come up 7 other times before this. 7 other times before this, somebody asked someone, "What is this you have done?" The first time was with Cain. God said it to Cain, "What is this you have done?" And then gives him a punishment, and Cain is all like, "Oh, this is too hard for me. This is too big of a punishment." It happens with Abraham when he lies about his wife Sarah, and he's like, "Oh, I feared for my life." Every single time this question is asked of somebody, they make excuses, they whine, they complain, they talk about how they feared, they minimize their sin, they downplay it. Every single time, every one of those 7 times before this. This 8th time, so 7 times, kind of the number of completion, this 8th time, a new cycle starts with how somebody responds to this question, "What is this deed you have done?" Verse 16. So Judah said, "What can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants." He doesn't, again, Benjamin is innocent. He doesn't proclaim Benjamin's innocence. Instead, he says, how can we justify ourselves? It's a rhetorical question. We can't. He says, we actually are guilty, all of us. All of us are guilty, and God has found out the iniquity. He admits his own sin. Instead of trying to minimize it or defend, he just says, we deserve this. They didn't go to Egypt to try to get Benjamin out. They went to Egypt to literally give themselves as slaves because they deserve that punishment. "Behold, we are my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found." They came to give themselves up and take the punishment for their iniquity. They didn't minimize it. Verse 17, but Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father." So Joseph's brothers tried. They tried to give themselves up. They even tried to turn themselves in as slaves. They see their own guilt. They know they are guilty people that deserve this. Joseph gives them another out. Just go, walk away. You tried. It's okay. Judah doesn't accept that, though. Look at verse. So he recounts to Joseph the story of his father and what has happened and how his father would go down in grief. Verse 30 of chapter 44. So now, when I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, and his life is bound up in the boy, his life is bound up in the boy's life. He's saying, if Benjamin dies, my father dies. So it'll be that when he sees that boy is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. For your servant became a guarantee for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the sin before my father all my days. So now, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a slave to my Lord, and let the boy go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the boy is not with me, lest I see the evil that would overtake my father? So now you see Joseph, he's interceding and pleading with Joseph to do what? What does Judah want to do? He wants to give himself up for his brother, Judah. Complete opposite. He is a changed man. So he made a vow to Jacob. He made an oath to him for his brother. And Judah now is an honest man. Judah now is a loving brother. He cares for his brother. Judah now is a loving son. Before, they let their father mourn when they told him a lie. Now, Judah does not want to see his father go down to the grave in sorrow. He cares for him. He loves him. Judah now is that faithful leader. Judah has become like Joseph. He's become like Joseph in his own character. He has turned from his past ways. He's the leader of his brothers, and he's willing to sacrifice himself for his brother, for his father, give himself up. So this is the climax of the story. Judah coming and pleading before Joseph to take him instead. And so we see chapter 45. So you should ignore the chapter. It doesn't mean anything. Verse 1. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he called out, have everyone go out for me. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Then he wept loudly, and the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were terrified at his presence, so they were in shock. They couldn't believe it, this Joseph they sold into slavery. Then Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. So now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are still 5 years in which there will neither be plowing nor harvesting. So God sent me before you to establish for you a remnant in the earth, and to keep you alive for a great remnant of survivors. So now, it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has set me as father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. So Joseph comes and tells them, like, he tells them, like, this was all part of God's plan. Like, this is why he could forgive. This is why they could be reconciled. The only way you can forgive others is if you first recognize what God has done for you, and that he's forgiven you, and you recognize that everything that's happening, it's not the brothers against him, it's God working through all things, his plan. And so he forgives his brothers. He's reconciled to his brothers. So that reconciliation always happens when the guilty party recognizes their sin, recognizes their guilt, doesn't minimize it, doesn't make excuses, doesn't blame. And then you see this even with the gospel, right? We can only be reconciled to God when we recognize our guilt before him, when we stop making excuses. And God is, like Joseph, very gracious to forgive even the wicked people like Judah and his brothers. And you also see that as Joseph, he was giving these tests and these trials to his brothers. It was for their good. It was for their character formation. Joseph saw how God used trials in his own life, and he put his brothers through those same trials, and he saw how God used it for their own character formation and future reconciliation. And so we see from here, he then tells his brothers to go down, to not argue on the way. Jacob comes up, he worships God, and God is fulfilling his promises. He's going to make a great nation of Jacob in Egypt and then eventually bring them out. And it's telling at the end of their lives, Jacob, when he goes to die, he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, the youngest of Joseph's sons. They take the birthright, but Judah has proven himself as a leader, and Judah will be the one through whom kings come in the line of Jacob in Israel. And at the end of their life, Joseph says, I'm going to die, I'm going to be buried here, but take my bones to the promised land. Jacob as well, when he died, he says, take me to the promised land. They were in the end of their life. Jacob even was a man of faith. Joseph was a man of faith. They knew God would fulfill the promises. They knew God would take them back to the land. And we see this even in Hebrews 11. This is the specific thing that's called out about Joseph and his faith. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. So he gave blessings. He predicted the future of what would happen in the land of promise. They were in Egypt, but he knew God would fulfill his promise. At the end of his life, Jacob has a new sense of confidence in what God is doing. Verse 22, by faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave commands concerning his bones. He wanted to be in the promised land. He had faith that God could work everything. And you see that in Exodus as the people are taken out of Egypt. So they were men of faith in the end, and God used the trials to grow that faith. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word and the story of Joseph and how you can use trials and tests for your purposes to grow us, to build faith, to show us our guilt and our need of you and salvation. Thank you for your blessings, even of the trials that come. In Christ's name, amen.